Hi, my name's Matt Widgery from FramePlanet.com. Welcome to another episode of Viewers Cues, the show where you send in questions about photography and I try and give you some answers to them. So let's crack straight on with question number one. This one comes from Rick Loveridge. He says, hey Matt, I've got to take some aerial shots from a plane. Any advice on what camera settings to use to nail it? He's using a D7000. Well, Rick, I took this question for two reasons. One, because I think I can get you roughly in the right direction. But two, I wanted to address the point of, because a lot of people, they ask questions like, I'm going to go and do some night photography. I want to get into street photography. I want to do portraiture. What should I set my camera to? As if there's some magic formula where you can look up in a book and go, right, okay, today I'm going to be doing beach portraiture. Therefore, I shall be at f5.6 at 200th of a second at ISO 400. Doesn't work like that, people. Look, I understand the temptation when you start in photography to want to have something that just gets you locked into the settings, because if you can just kind of like get those things set out, then you can kind of worry about everything else. The thing about photography is that it's, and I know it's difficult when you first start out to sort of get into this mindset, but it's really worth training yourself to do it, because the thing about photography is this: it's about looking at the situation that you have on in front of you on that day and trying to figure out what the solution to those problems is. So, regardless of what it is, and we'll use the aerial photography as an example of this, because this will show you the process that I go through when I'm going on a shoot and I want to figure out where my camera settings should be as my starting point, because they may well go up and down a little bit as the shoot unfolds and as different things occur, but it's useful to have a starting point, and this is how I work that out. You look at with aerial photography, you figure out the things that you want to get, that you're going to be sort of challenged with. So the thing that kind of strikes me to start with is that if you are bouncing around in a plane at 10,000 feet, there's probably going to be turbulence. You may be using quite a long lens. If you're in a little plane or a helicopter or something, you may be dangling out of it, so there might be wind buffeting, but even if not, you're still using a long lens, and so there's going to be movement potentially in the shot that you want to cancel out, right? So the first thing to look at is shutter speed. Do I need a high shutter speed or a low shutter speed in this shot, and how high or how low? If you're shooting the indoors of a church with nobody else around and it's dark, just whack the thing on a tripod. You can use 10th of a second, and then all the rest of your settings can be low. If you're shooting stuff out of a plane, you need to have a high shutter speed, because it's going to stop all that wobbling around of the long lens and the buffeting and the falling out of the plane to a hideous death. Kidding, don't do that, Rick. That would spoil the camera when you landed. But yeah, so if you need a high shutter speed, that's the first thing to lock in. So try somewhere high, go to 1,000th of a second, see where you go. So lock it in. You have to start somewhere, as Zach Arias says. You have to start somewhere. So it doesn't matter if you start at 500th of a second or 1,000th of a second or 2,000th of a second. You can play with it later, but you need to lock something into your camera so you can get shooting. So 1,000th of a second, for argument's sake. Point two, how much of the shot do you want to get in focus? Now, if you are doing a portrait of somebody and perhaps there's some kind of pretty ugly stuff in the background that you want to blow out, then you will want a very shallow depth of field, so that maybe just the eyes are in focus, and almost as it gets to the ears, it started to go. And certainly by the time it gets to the dumpster that's 30 feet behind you, all that's blurred off into a lovely buttery, bokeh-y sort of smushy niceness. If you're doing aerial photography, the chances are that it's more of a landscape-based thing, and you might want to get more in focus. So how do you do that? Then you tighten up the aperture, right? So you squinch the aperture down to f11, f16, somewhere around there, and that means that plenty of the scene is going to be in focus. So you've got those two set in. When you've got an exposure triangle, there's three things that you can play with. So if you've already got 1,000th of a second and f16, you're not getting very much light in that camera. So if you're out in the middle of the day and it's bright sunshine, you might be all right at a fairly low ISO. But if you're shooting sunset, or if it's like a stormy, moody sort of cloud thing, going on, and there's not very much ambient light around, then you may have to boost the ISO up to 800 or 1600 or 3200 or whatever it is to get the right exposure. So that's the thing. It's whatever the situation is that you're looking to photograph, figure out what your challenges are. movement. Are you looking at something that's going to be moving around a lot? You know, if you're shooting a concert, for example, are you shooting a really bouncy rock band that are kind of like jumping all over the stage and moshing? Or are you shooting a very quiet sort of rehearsal, you know, like a recital piece on a piano or on like a sort of big cello or something like that, you know, where there's not going to be so much movement. That will determine your shutter speed. You know, how much do you want to get in focus? Do you want everything in the picture in focus, or do you want not very much in focus? That will determine your aperture. And from there, the last sort of thing that will kind of get you out of the jam of those other two things being where you need them to be is your ISO. So that's it. So rather than sort of sending me in questions about, you know, I'm going to be shooting a football match on Friday, what settings do I put into my camera? Start to work those things out. Get a starting point. If you start out with a particular point and it's wrong, if it's too bright or if it's too dark, then you can adjust from there. But start with a starting point and then figure out, you know, what you need to adjust. Because that way you'll be able to approach any subject and be able to shoot it. So, you know, that's what I would say on that one. Learn how to sort of think like a photographer. Because when you can think like a photographer, then you start to do all this stuff automatically. And then you're not so worried about what the camera settings are. And you can worry about composition and meaning and atmosphere and all that good stuff. Right, Ian Tim says, great video, looking at the Nik collection to add to my Lightroom and Photoshop. Would you recommend? Yes and no. Yes for some of it, haven't used a lot of it, so can't really speak to it all. The ones that are brilliant and the ones that I really like are the Sharpener Pro. There's the Sharpener Pro 3 RAW sort of pre-sharpener, which I use. There's a video up on the screen there. Ting! Wonders of technology. That video there is a comparison of the sharpening in Lightroom compared to the Nik plugin for particularly Fuji films. Yes, Fuji films RAW files, the RAF files. There is a difference there. You can have a look at that one and see which one I prefer. They both do a perfectly good job, but it'll give you an idea of just how good that Sharpener Pro is. So that's that. The other one I use is Silver Effects Pro as a black and white converter, particularly for things like landscapes. It does a really nice job with skies and with rocks and with sea and that kind of stuff. There's a way of really bringing out texture that's very... looks very kind of grainy and like old sort of film, like old Tri-X and that kind of stuff. So that's really nice. And I use that a lot. The ones I don't use so much, the color effects one I don't really use, and the Analog Effects Pro, which is kind of like they're almost like Instagram-y filters. I'm not that keen on those myself. Doesn't mean to say there's anything wrong with them. I just don't happen to use those. And I'm not even averse to using some filters. I've got some of the VSCO filters that emulate some of the old sort of pro film stocks from back in the day. And I'm a big fan of some of those, like the Polaroid 690 series that they do on that. I really, really like. You know, absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. It's just for my particular style. Like the way I see it, you can't kind of like just apply every filter, every effect, everything to everything you do. Like there has to be some coherence. So I pick the one or two things that I kind of like, and that, you know, helps me get towards a more coherent portfolio, you know, so that's just me. But they are certainly very good, and definitely try them out. Certainly they work very well in what they do. You know, so yeah, great. So the next one is from Girish Menon. He says, is this camera good enough to give you 20 by 30 inch archival quality prints? Girish put this comment on the Ricoh GR versus X Pro 1. Is farewell to the Ricoh GR video that I did, where I was getting rid of the GR, getting in the X Pro 1 because I wanted a mirrorless camera with interchangeable lenses. Video I did about 18 months ago. He put a comment on there, which I thought was worth answering, again, from two perspectives. I try with these questions to make them as broad in their interest as possible, so that the person gets their answer, but hopefully other people kind of like get a little bit more out of it as well. So it becomes a little bit more, you know, universal in its relevance. So I'm going to split this up into two parts. The first one, is this camera good enough to give you a 20 by 30 inch print? I don't know, Girish, whether or not you were talking about the Ricoh GR, which is the outgoing camera, or the X Pro 1, which is the incoming camera particularly, but the answer is the same to both. Yes, you can. 16 megapixel APS-C sensor in both those cameras. Both are going to be easily giving you 20 by 30. In fact, I used to get 20 by 30 without breaking a sweat on my Nikon D300, which is a 12 megapixel sensor. So yes, you absolutely can. The other point to mention on that one, though, is when you're preparing a file, when you're preparing an image to send out or to print in those bigger sizes, just make sure that you increase the image size first before you print it. So I usually use Photoshop for this, and I will actually set the dimensions of the image that I want to then print to be the correct size. So I actually physically expand the image out, and that does whatever interpolation, or I don't know, somebody else will correct me on that, but whatever thing it does to the pixels to kind of make sure that they look all right and they don't look pixelated. If you just stretch the image as it comes out of camera, then it will look blocky, it will look pixelated, because its natural image size is going to be smaller than that. But yes, you can. Second point is about archival quality prints, and he says, is it good enough to make archival quality prints? Girish, I don't quite know what you're referring to this, whether or not you're genuinely asking the question about whether or not the camera can do archival quality prints, or whether or not you're just telling me that that's what you want to do with the prints. Of course, the camera has nothing to do with the archival quality prints, right? It's to do with the ink and the paper and the matte and the frame and all that stuff being low acid and able to resist UV and all that other stuff, so that it doesn't degrade over time, so that your prints look nice still in the future. It isn't anything to do with the camera. Any like a cell phone or a DSLR or a mirrorless or a film camera or anything at all, you can make archival prints from. It's the process of doing those prints and the materials that you use that will determine how archival or otherwise it is. So that's the answer to that one. Right, next question. Robert Ham Photography. Ham reminds me of bacon just now. Top tip. I've just had a bacon and pesto sandwich and it was really nice. I thoroughly recommend that. However, that's not the question that Robert is asking. He says, hi Matt, I see you wear glasses. Yes, I do. Did you have to buy a corrective diopter for the X Pro 1? He says he wears glasses and he's considering getting one of the cameras and wants some more insight. See what you did there, Robert. Some more insight into this issue. Right, so I didn't bother actually in the end. The thing is, as Robert knows, but some of you may not, with the X Pro 1, there's no adjustable diopter for glasses, whereas like there is, for example, on the XT1 that's recording this. A lot of cameras, they've got like a little thing so that you can lift your glasses up, and they've got like a little wheel on them which will correct for your vision, so that it brings things into focus without needing glasses, so that you can focus on stuff. The X Pro 1 doesn't do that, but the old Nikon diopters work with it. So what you can do is get the old 19mm thread diopters that screwed into the back of the FE and FM series of Nikon film SLRs from back in the 70s or whatever it was, like the FE, FE1, FE2, FM, FM2, all those cameras had this 19mm thread on them, and those will fit on the back of your X Pro 1, which is nice. They're not an adjustable one. You have to get the diopter right for your vision. So it's not got a wheel that adjusts these things. They come in a +1 or a +2. So you just have to know what your eyes are. If you're unsure, find a camera that's got the little adjusty wheel on it, adjust it till it looks right, and then look on the side. It'll be +1, +2, +3. And you can work it out from there. Me personally, I didn't bother using it. Actually, I just looked through my glasses, or I used the live view on the back of the camera. I wasn't that precious about it, and it wasn't a particular concern. In fact, even now, although I do have the diopter correction on the XT1, I still kind of just jam my glasses up. Maybe that's just habit or laziness on my part. Don't know. Right, so final question comes from James Rutherford. James, big shout out to you, mate, because you came on my last photo walk just about a month ago, and were brilliant, brilliant fun. I loved talking to you, mate, and thanks very much for sending in the question. He says, please could you tell me the name of your travel tripod? I've sold my Manfrotto now and I'm looking for a decent copy of the three-legged thing. So yes, I can. We talked about this on the walk, and so I know where you're coming from on this. I use a Giottos for my travel tripod. It's this one here, and I'm going to have to read the name of it because, as with all tripods, they've all, apart from the three-legged things, which have brilliant names, but everybody else's tripods have rubbish names that you can't remember. So this one is the, Giottos Carbon Reverse Professional Tripod VGRN 8265. Told you it wasn't a very good name, but that's what this one is. And I've actually got a fluid head on there for doing video with, but it actually came as a kit with a ball head, which is a MH652. So that's what it comes with. But the thing I like about this, which is really cool, and I'm not going to confirm or deny that it's a copy of the three-legged thing, or if indeed three-legged thing are a copy of this, who knows? But they do definitely have really, 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 really similar products out there, both carbon fiber travel tripods that do this thing where the legs fold up and underneath, which is cool, so they fold up smaller. But look at this is amazing. If you've never seen one of these in action before, I just think this is the funkiest, James Bondiest thing you've ever seen on a tripod. So you unscrew that bit there, right? So you unscrew a leg. I know some people will be thinking, well, whoop-de-doo, what's the big deal about that? But what you then also do is you take the middle bit out, so you discard these two legs, and then you screw these two bits together, and I'm sure the penny has dropped by now. What you end up with is a monopod. That's really squeaky. Right, there we go. So what you then do, when that's all extended out like that, whatever it is, well, that'll do, you get the idea. Yeah, so basically you've got a sort of carbon fibre monopod thing that fits into a tripod, so that you've just got the one thing. If you're going travelling and space is of a premium, you can take the tripod in case you need it, but if you don't need the whole thing of it, you can just want to travel light, you can use that, and it's a full-size monopod. Isn't that brilliant? I love that. I think that's very cool. It's a little weird. It's kind of like it feels a little bit unbalanced when you kind of pick it up, because the way that these tripods work, you've got carbon, 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 and then metal on the end there, and then obviously the head. So all the weight's really at this end, which feels a little weird. But it only feels weird until you put it down. When you put it down, having the weight at this end actually kind of almost feels right, because it dampens that head turning a little bit. It just feels really nice. So that's it. It's just give you that name again. I'll put the notes down below anyway, but it's the Giottos Carbon Reverse Professional Tripod VGRN 8265. What a brilliant and poetic name that is. Can't get that done now. But anyway, so that's that. This one's got really sticky. I don't know why. Put jam sandwiches in it. Thanks very much for watching the show. As always, please subscribe on the big red button underneath this video if you're watching on YouTube. And if you've got questions that you'd like me to answer in a future edition, please leave them in the comments below. And you never know, you might get onto the next episode. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers.